Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this podcast, we showcase unusual success stories because unusual times call for unusual stories. I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Scott Frankfurt, one of my mentors, one of the people that has helped me so much and always gives such great advice out here in Los Angeles. He's done everything from making hits in the 80s to working as the vice president of Spectrasonics, one of the most respected software music companies in the world, to now managing and running his own home studio that is so professional it would blow your mind. He's had people like Earth, Wind & Fire, Manhattan Transfer, Sergio Mendes, Grammy-award winners here, there, everywhere. He has done it all in the music business, and he is absolutely 100% the real deal, as real as it gets. I'm so excited to sit down and talk with him today about everything and about how he got where he is. There is so much gold in this episode for you. For anybody who wants to truly make it in the music business, I would say that Scott Frankfurt has made it in every sense of the word. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Scott Frankfurt, thank you for joining me today, my man. How are you?
I am well. Thank you, Ross. It's a real joy. I love you, man.
I love the vibe that you got going on in the back of your studio for those who are looking at the video feed. Cozy as always.
Thank you. Yes, this is the control room here at Scott Frankfurt Studio. And that's some of the stuff that's lying around. But there's two stations, so I'm sitting where I normally work. This is actually the exact spot I would normally work in. And you've been here, so you know what it's like. But
yes, it's the mothership. It's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the coolest studios you'll ever see. He's got cables coming in and out of everywhere. He has turned his house into one of the most amazing recording studios you'll ever see. Just every room is rigged to record full bands, symphonic orchestras. You can have a drummer in one room. You can have a vocalist in the bathroom. You can have 10 musicians in the den. It's really a sight to behold. Labor of love.
No doubt.
I think we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, I'm guessing that you have a pretty typical success story, wouldn't you say, Scott?
Not at all. Not at all. And success, what is that? In terms of how one defines that is probably crucial in a show like yours,
Sure. So tell us a little bit about what is the quick introduction, the paragraph intro to Scott Frankfurt, whatever you want to share.
Sure. Well, I am a husband. I care very much about the integrity of my family and my wife. Her name is Sharon. She's my co-conspirator in all things. And then I am a musician since I was a kid. And that has brought me present day to I'm a recording studio owner, sound designer, arranger, producer. How many slashes you want to throw over there? It seems like you have to be able to do a lot of things these days to get along in the business. But we're still here, very grateful for that. And I had a kind of a dual career, that made it possible for me to pursue the things I love and am passionate about, along with things that, how do you survive while you're doing that in an artistic, industry. So it was definitely
absolutely,
mostly, standing on shoulders of people that guide you along the way and things like that. But yeah, that's the short version is husband, musician, studio owner, entrepreneur, and lover of music. Yeah.
So, all right, give us a little breakdown of the steps, just broad strokes of your career from the beginning to now. What have you done for work, self-employed, just the general bullet point list of your career up until this point?
Well, let's see. Starting from the ice cream shop, you mean, like in high school?
Sure. Yeah, if that's where it begins, then that's where it begins.
Kind of starts there. But the bullet points are much simpler. I wanted to be a recording studio drummer. So I discovered the drums in my early teens. After playing the piano as a kid, mandatory piano lessons from the parents, and
absolutely.
then bar mitzvahed, a Jewish household here out in the San Fernando Valley, and so bar mitzvahed, and you have to.
So born and raised in the greater LA area.
That's right. And the first time I heard a hi-hat go, I was like, my DNA rearranged. It was like one of those moments where it was like, clearly this is what I love. I don't know how to get into this, but so bar mitzvah was the way to get the drum set. It was like,
okay.
That was how to do that. I was in a neighborhood where there was, pretty vibrant music scene out here in the Valley, believe it or not, in the 70s. Cool. And so I was in a band within the first year of my drum lessons with a bunch of people a lot better than me, 15, 16-year-olds. And so I had a really nice entree into, okay, I want to be a drummer no matter what everyone says. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And we were actually doing pay-for gigs, by the time I was, 14 and a half, 15. Anyway, so that all the way through school, through college, music, drums. Anything.
When you say pay for gigs, what do you mean? Like little bars, or what kind of gigs?
No. Well, I mean, we were a little underage for bars, but we could go to like under 21 clubs. We could do local. There used to be a lot of local places you could play as a band, and then weddings, casuals. We would do casuals,
and other bar mitzvahs, maybe.
Very much so. This turned into
from bar mitzvah to bar mitzvah.
Yeah, and I was with some really great musicians. I mean, Victoria Shaw. Today, she's quite a formidable songwriting force in Nashville. She's really terrific. Wow. She was my first band, and the Vicky Shaw band.
Wow.
So anyway, through college, playing my way, got some scholarships in high school. I was very fortunate to connect with the local music here. Like I say, was pretty great. I mean, so we had Dave Cause as our lead saxophone in our jazz band. So I'm marching and I'm playing jazz, and we're doing festivals and winning scholarships and this kind of thing. And so I had a lot of encouragement to do that. Decided I wanted to go to North Texas State University and go full jazz, down that path. But, the parents had other plans for lots of reasons, It's like, so I ended up getting rerouted to USC. And I'll be honest, I was a pretty miserable Trojan, because I was in like 5 bands at the time outside of school.
I mean, is there any other kind? Who are the Trojans' enemies?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But there's no doubt that, I was completely sold out for music. I didn't even know how to become or aim at success. I just knew that was breathing to me. That was everything.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that while trying to keep my studies going. So I ended up with a comp sci equivalent degree after 5 years of school, to appease, all of that stuff. So it was kind of like formative is what I meant to say. It was formative, and it was also like, it was a struggle, to try to appease, because it was without getting into the long, personal background of all that, it was definitely like, there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure. So to survive, that also meant working in retail and selling drumsticks in the drum store, and so I learned a lot about sales.
The ice cream store later.
Right. Well, that was before. That was like summer job, But out there in Simi Valley, World Music in Simi Valley back in the day. And but what was great about that is that my dad was a real estate salesman, commercial real estate, so I heard sales my whole life in the house. He worked from home a lot.
Okay.
And
interesting.
Yeah, and so that's a tough industry, to be an independent commercial real estate broker, when you're up against, those kinds of situations. So he had a rough go of it, but
imagine.
But I did by osmosis just hear him selling all the time, and then one thing I kind of picked up from that was that to sell something is to care about the person that's buying it, and if you don't care about them, you really don't have a chance of genuinely succeeding in that business. If you just look at the numbers, Wonderful. If you just look at the commission, if you just look at the payday. So I picked that up. He never said that to me, but I picked it up by how he would talk to people. He had he had a way, you know, of talking to people. And
Yeah.
so that,
Right.
and his little office was like next to my little bedroom. So when I wasn't, you know, on my drums, I'd pick that up. Anyway, so the sales thing went pretty well in Simi Valley. And then I was, one of the bands I was in was produced by a man named Michael Marins. And Michael Marins back then, he's a formidable, you know, synthesist, guitar player, producer, you know, and especially back then, in his, you know, full strength back then, he was quite a guy. He was also a journalist, writing for lots of technology companies and worked for technology companies. He was also working at this place more as a manager. And he took a liking to me. We were friends, very close friends. And he introduced me to the OB8, which he owned.
Okay.
And of course, the OB8 was in the synthesizer department. So I'm in the drum department selling sticks, but all the cool stuff. And now the very first...
in the synthesizer. That's the way I always felt as a kid. That was my favorite area, the synthesizer place.
Well, this is now the Lindrum and the EMU drumulator and the EMU SP12 came out. And this is the very first days where these machines were extremely expensive. And but if you could get one and you were thinking ahead to, like, you know, you could take one of two roads back then. I'm a drummer. I'm threatened to buy drum machines, which was about where half of the local 47 was. And then the other half, which is, this is a tool, I'm going to expand what I can do as a drummer. To the extent, I mean, Ross, it was such an issue back then that I remember going with Michael to the local 47 and trying to figure out how, we did a seminar for them on this is the technology, introducing only drummers to this technology. Yeah. And, you know, it was a split room. I mean, people were freaked out. It's like, you know, this is the enemy versus this is the future, you know. And but anyway, so I took to it, and he was such a great help. And, you know, everything I know about synthesizers today, I started learning with him, you know. And that turned into the craziest opportunity that changed my whole life. And again, there's always this mix of serendipity with, like, passion, I think, that makes anyone's career go. You have to love something very deeply to endure all the crap you have to get through to get there, you know.
The heartache. Pain.
And you might even not even know you're doing it. You might not even know, you might not be that clever to know this is how I'm going to, you know, set myself up for a career, you know, especially, I mean, in my early mid-20s, what did I know? I just knew I loved this music. So one day, a rep comes in from Ensoniq Corp, which is the last U.S. manufacturer of samplers, kind of outside of the Japanese competition. You had Roland, Yamaha, Korg, all those Japanese companies, and basically, you had you know, Ensoniq and EMU, and that was basically it. And so I had a nice in with EMU because then this same man started working for EMU, Michael Marins, and so I was able to do stuff in the sound design world for the SP12 early sampling drum machine. Yeah. Even to the point where we had, like, a vinyl record of, like, cool sounds you could make with it and all this stuff. And
nice.
So
you sold,
a rep
or
comes
that you
in.
listened?
What's that? No, it was
sold a
like
vinyl record?
demonstration vinyl. You know those thin ones that you get in the back of a magazine, keyboard magazine or whatever.
Yeah. Of course.
So, but the rep that came in was from Ensoniq Corp, and they had a sampler called the Mirage. You may be familiar with the Mirage. That was kind of the...
I'm not actually.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it was in the land of Fairlights and emulators that were $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 to own. Synclavier, $250,000 back then. For under $2,000, you could buy a Mirage sampler and sample. And that's Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis. I mean, that's how all those hits were. You know, a lot of those hits have tons of Mirage samples on them, and on the thing goes. So Mirage had this big hit with this thing, and a really good sales force and a really good rep. He came out. He kind of noticed me because I was selling something at the time. I was selling a lot of Emaxes, the sampler that EMU had at the time, their compact sampler, competing with the Mirage. And they had this new thing out called the EPS. Yeah, that's right. The EPS sampler. And I was selling a bunch of those too. And I had some custom sounds, and he liked the sounds. And he said, we have these sales training things back in Malvern, Pennsylvania. I think you'd be great for this. And so I got all excited. And so my boss at the time, Larry Farragalli, he was like super supportive and said, yeah, go back and train him, And so went back there. And by the end of this 4 or 5 day experience of being at the Malvern, Pennsylvania factory, where they do all their own manufacturing there, I mean, it was a sight to see for someone my age to see that whole operation. It was amazing. Yeah. I got noticed by the instructor, Roy Elkins, and he said, I'm going to pass along some of what you're doing here to our marketing team. And next thing I know, I'm in Jerry Kowarski's office, director of marketing for Ensoniq Corp., telling him as this pompous little, 24-year-old or whatever I was.
Sure, yeah.
You got a great sampler here, Jerry, but the sounds are just awful. You really need me to help you with the sounds.
Yeah, I love it.
So he gave me a job on the spot. And it was just hilarious. And there was another man there, Tony McNanny, who was also hired on in the marketing department that month. And so I became... from that meeting, the West Coast chief sound developer for Ensoniq Corp, and my job was to go to famous musicians' houses and sample them. Let's start off with George Duke, and let's get George Duke's piano. Why don't you go over here and get Paul Jackson Jr.'s guitar? Why don't you go over here and record all the guys in Chicago? How about Peter Wolf over there? How about the System over here? These were all names that at the time were like really big in pop,
You're traveling all around. You're on a plane all the time to do this.
Well, most of it was West Coast. And and so I was able, because the LA studio scene, that's what they didn't have. They had the New York scene kind of covered, but they didn't have.
Okay.
So can you imagine what a gift that was for me to have an entree walking in with brand new technology that everyone's interested in, saying, we're going to sample you. And I got to meet and get to know these people and make all these great memories. So it was a real gift.
Incredible.
Yeah. And for the next 10 years, that's how I was able to, kind of selectively filter what happened on what I was really aiming for, which was my music career. So I had this retail and I had this sound design job for a decade. Meanwhile, what I realized was that was I was doing the thing that I had to do to pursue the privileged thing. And I really do consider a music career a privilege. And I think we forget that. We think the music industry kind of owes us something, but it doesn't. It's like a lot of people competing for those very few spots. And so the idea of having this dual career, and with that young energy, mid-20s energy, I was able to do it. I was able to work full-time for Ensoniq and full-time pursue, so I didn't sleep much. But that's how I was able to selectively filter, like, okay, I'm not driving to Palm Springs for 4 hours to make $50. You know what I'm saying? That I could rule that out because I had enough money to put bread on the table, right? So I think every time I have like these kinds of conversations where like, the college kids will come through and check out the studio and, ask me similar questions about,
Sure.
what did you think success was going to look like? I was just trying to like make music at any cost. I'd sleep on the floor next to those drums. I mean, I loved them so much, and I loved synthesizers so much, and being in bands and creative pursuits and all of that stuff so much. It didn't matter. And then I was so truly fortunate that the industry that I chose, I actually really loved and took to. Yeah. So the sound design side was...
and then eventually that parlayed into a gig at Spectrasonics, which I think a lot of people will know.
Yes.
Makers of Stylus RMX and Trillion and an Atmosphere and Omnisphere, the things that I used to love and want as a kid more than anything.
Well, that's a great transition because, because of the formative work that was going on there for that decade, there was a time when I could work on music at a level that was, like I say, kind of tailored. I could say no to stuff that was maybe distracting or marginal and say yes to the good stuff, even if it was fewer and farther between. And what that allowed was for me to have a really good run producing, arranging, programming, taking advantage of all the technology I had access to. And what's interesting about that is that EMU bought Ensoniq Corp, and in a day, Ross, I had no job.
Yeah.
So it was, hey, Scott, it's been great. So sorry to tell you this. We've been bought. We're restructuring. We're going to become a hearing aid company or a sound card company or whatever they became.
They became a hearing aid company?
Really? The interesting thing about Ensoniq was it was basically Al Charpentier and those guys. They were all about custom silicon, custom chip for an application for a business that already exists. Yeah. Well, keyboards were one place that already existed that needed chips. The Commodore 64 needed a chip, right? So you had a lot to do with that. And then hearing aids needed a chip. and early sound cards.
What a world.
Anyway, right. So
what a world.
I had the biggest panic of my life, like, because you get used to that paycheck, right? And how am I going to keep all of this going? And but at that time, records were doing really well. You could still get a really decent sized budget and do really good work, and it wasn't as crazy as is now in the last 10 years. And so I had about a 7-year run of just doing that, and then I turned 40 years old. I was married at the time to my late wife, Jody, and we had an artist career in the gospel scene and all that stuff. How did the Jewish kid get into the gospel scene? Story for another day. But
I love it. I have a feeling we're going to revisit that at some point. But then again, it's like, how did you do anything? So it's all part of it, right?
It's completely random. And so at that time, my mindset was married to this incredible woman who was 14 years older than me. I was looking at that saying, I have a feeling 10 years from now, I'm not going to be wanting to chase what was going on in the business, which is you'd have, a lot of income because you'd be on a couple of great projects on a nice run. And then you'd be like 3 months just like waiting for the next thing. And then you'd be up. And it wasn't like you can do now where you can like start a business that can kind of roll and be a little more stable. And so I was looking at that and said, I think in January was coming around. I thought, I'm going to throw my hat back in the ring, and I don't know who to call except my fiercest competitor, actually one of my heroes, Eric Persing. And I called him. I said,
Genius,
hey, Eric.
No doubt, by the way.
Yeah. I gave him a ring, and I said, listen, I'm going to the NAMM show. I'm thinking about going back into sound design. Could you tell me where I might walk by and drop off a card? That was really the purpose of my call, to which he said, Scott, you're not going to believe this, but your name came up the other day, and we just assumed you were still making records and wouldn't have any interest in this, so I didn't call you, but could we meet and could we talk? And then the rest is kind of history. 13 years of me and Eric were kind of, very, very tightly woven together in the construction of all those instruments you mentioned. And to this day, I still collaborate with Spectrasonics, and it's a tremendous, wonderful thing that I was able to enjoy kind of a second life in the sound design world, which again allowed us to make these products that, I just have so much respect for what Eric has done, and I'm very proud of what I was able to contribute. But at the same time, that day I made that phone call, I had absolutely nothing but passion and love in the tank, just like, I just want to keep doing this. And
a whole lot of skill.
Well, it develops. Obviously, you stick to anything long enough, you get pretty good at it, and then God's grace and talent and whatever He puts in there. I think all of us are given some stuff that's like to be expanded upon, with our unique personalities and stuff like that. So so the Spectrasonics run.
What was the first project? Was Atmosphere the first one? I'm trying to get a time. I mean, I remember Atmosphere was my first experience with Spectrasonics. I mean, I had Fruity Loops at the time. Do you remember Fruity Loops?
Of course.
Software that became FL Studio. So I had Fruity Loops version 3, and it had like FL oscillator, like a 3X oscillator, and I was like, ding, 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 ding. And then like I saw an ad for Atmosphere, and it exploded my brain. I just couldn't believe. I was like, whoa, you can get those sounds. Like I think the first pad I loaded was like the ooh ah female choir. I was like, ooh ah, and if you just held it down, it would just kind of morph between ooh and ah. And I just played some things on my MIDI keyboard, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, that was the first software synthesizer instrument that I ever bought was Atmosphere.
That's amazing.
And that was like a lot of money to me because I was working in retail at that time, and it was like $200-$300 or something like that. So it was like an entire paycheck for me went to that, but like no regrets at all. Like it was like, oh my God.
Well,
so was that the first one, or was there another one? I mean,
I was a sample library customer of Eric back then.
Okay.
And those 3 instruments were on licensed technology. Spectrasonics was not a software company at the time. They were a library company.
See. Okay.
And so I came on right when those 3 products had already been out. And like I say, I was a customer. And then right when the transition started about, it was 2003. So I might be a little fuzzy on exactly what that point was. But basically, we started up on the expansions for RMX. Going from stylus to stylus RMX was when I entered the
I remember
scene.
that.
And that was also the time when Glenn Olander, the software developer, came online and Spectrasonics became a software company. So it was no longer just soundware where you'd buy a CD-ROM.
Right.
Now it was this. So I helped develop a lot of the sound software interface that became Stylus RMX. So when you got Atmosphere, you're probably 2002, I would guess.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and maybe 2001, and that transition was massive. It was a huge risk because going from no engine to your own engine is a tremendous software risk. Well, anyway, all of that to say, that turned into about 7 or 8 expanders for RMX. It turned into all of the Time Designer. I'm very proud of Time Designer in Stylus RMX. That was largely that interface was kind of largely thought up here. It's a team. Everybody. Yeah. It's amazing that a product from those days is still a viable tool in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it's because of things like that, because you can change anything that's in it to anything else. So it's kind of an infinite tool in that way.
And you hear it everywhere. For those people who don't know it by name, you've heard it in commercials and songs. I mean, it's like there are still some of those loops that I'll hear from the original V1 of Stylus. Yeah. I know it like at the back of my hand. I'll be watching a commercial and you'll just say, oh, yep, I know that drum loop, or some composition somewhere.
I used to think, we'd work so hard on these multis, in RMX and stuff. You could play one key and it would do this whole like evocative, evolving rhythm that would and it's like one key press, and we'd say, we ought to be getting royalty checks for that because it's like that's like the theme of National Geographic right there, and it's like, well, where's mine?
You're not wrong about that. You're really not wrong.
But it's I mean, I'm totally joking, but it was kind of funny because there's a lot of.
All right, so you become the VP of Spectrasonics, one of the most well-known. So how long did it take you to become VP?
Well, I would say probably about, I'm guessing here, I'm sorry, it was probably about halfway into my tenure there, something like that. It was an evolution, and in a lot of ways, when it comes to anything you're talking about, like in that case, or even in your own career path or anything, it's always a little easier to look in the rear view and see what happened. Sure. Because when you're in it, you almost don't realize it. But I think I got the title, about 7 or 8 years into it, working from like just a entry-level guy and then working on the sound dev team, or kind of helping create the sound dev team, I suppose. Trade shows, the whole thing, everything that it took to get that younger company going. And then the VP also took a couple of paths. It started out as VP of the company, but then turned into VP of design because my strengths were really in design and sound. That's where my love was, not so much.
Right.
I don't know that I had as much talent at meeting with distributors, that kind of thing. And but I would do for the Persings, for Eric, because I have so much respect for him and learned so much from him. I would do whatever it took to make the company better. And I think that's also a part of probably something that's probably a valuable thing to remember is that being willing to throw down in an area where, is needed as opposed to what you enjoy. Sometimes that's a sacrifice you have to make to be in the right room, to be in a place where you want to be. And
interesting.
To sit in the front row
Love that.
of that company. To sit in the front row of that for all those years was as far as my adult life, that was the most precious time of my adult life in terms of work and career. Meanwhile, I was able to still pursue sessions and all the things I've always loved. And so, was it hard? Yeah. Because, and then I think that will ring true with every one of your audience and I know yourself. It's like anything that takes off, looks like an overnight success and all that stuff, has nothing to do with that. Your whole life has been building up, right? Your whole life, everything that your life brings to bear, how you think about people, how you think about the world, how you think about, relationships, how you think about money, how you think about what you're bringing into the world, bears on these successes. Because at the end of the day, I really believe that you need to be as 360 degree of a person as you can possibly be. Very hard to do. But if you can aim at, you can't do it all the time, but if you can aim at every part of your life, they inform each other. So if I'm ruining my marriage, I'm not going to do so great at work. I mean, I'm talking about me. I'm not saying that people haven't been very successful who've ruined marriages. I'm just saying that for me, I've always pursued that path that I personally, if everything's okay at home, I'm going to be better when I show up for that meeting. Or if I'm going to perform.
And that goes back to what is your definition of success?
Right.
That goes back to, some people say okay, the money, the fame, that is success. Forget my kids, forget my family, forget my wife, forget all of that. But for you, and for me as well, obviously, that's an integral part. There is no success without those other aspects.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that. I really believe that the biggest success I have is that I wake up every single day and get to do what I love to do. Now, that is a loaded statement. There is a lot of pain, a lot of hard work, a lot of even like my health. I did pay a little bit on my health side for working 20 hours a day for 20 years. But I still, though, wake up every single day and love what I do every single day. It's like, for me, having a big chunk of work to have to get done, with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever, and sit down and hit the day, to me, that's like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So everything aligns, everything's happy, and I feel like that's one of the best things you could tell anybody to pursue is just make sure that you love what you're doing. And not everyone gets that. Not everybody gets that, And what I mean is they may want it, but it's hard to achieve. And there is a little bit of serendipity in there, and there is a little bit of the unknown, But I know that, making your own luck and all that stuff, I do believe there's aspects of that are very, very true. There's we call it around here when we're talking with our interns, employees, assistants, et cetera, we talk about the energy exchange. Not to be woo-woo, because I'm not really a woo-woo guy, but the truth is, for me, I believe, and I think it's universally true, you put good energy into a situation, good energy is going to come back at you. If you're just pulling all the energy out of the room and there's just, you come in and then you vacuum some of the energy and then you leave, that's not going to be successful in the long run. It's what you bring to it. And that is something that I really feel like is it's crucial. It's crucial for someone wanting to get forward in whatever they do is make sure that you're, I think likability wins. I think being a decent person wins at the end of the day. Because you may have a lot of money, success, fame, but you may spend the next 3 decades miserable and alone. Was it worth it? How many people get all of it? Like get the fame, the money, the success, and the happiness. Is like, whoa, it's a tall. Yeah. That's
shrinking.
Yeah, it shrinks. It shrinks. It's not impossible, but I think so much of it is your state of mind too. And that's why I always applaud people that are givers. The people that give their time, give of their resources, things like that. That are. I wish I was more that way. That's something I aim for is that generous spirit. You're on that list of some of the most generous people that I know. And, I mean that. I'm here today because you're a generous person. And the day I met you on a session, I think it was Tori Spelling or somebody like that.
Yeah, it was a Tori Spelling reality show that never aired.
You and your beautiful wife, Marua, came here as actors, but you were playing yourselves. And it was, I immediately was struck by, these are good people. These are people I wouldn't mind knowing. And then we had a great conversation after that, and you showed me your amazing DJ skills that to this day I still kind of like, oh, dude, you are the messenger, man. You are the messenger. Thanks, man.
Thank you, brother.
Well, it's true. It's why I'm here and why I feel it's important to support anything you guys are doing, because whatever you set your mind to, I learned by just observing you and being your friend, where your heart is. And that's attractive, I think, to people like me who are, nowadays when I'm not doing sound design and I'm running the recording studio, my whole job is looking into that ISO and trying to convince a 22-year-old girl that she can let her heart open when she sings that thing a little more than she ever thought possible, or whoever it is. It's like you have to have a little bit of, you have to have those feelers, I guess, to know where people are at to do this job. And so I knew the day I met you, I knew there's a quality chap in a quality marriage doing great things. And so anyway, just want to say that.
Thank you. Well, that is, that means the world to me in that respect is more than mutual. And I think this is actually a good transition into the next thing, because I think I can give a little bit of a bit of a segue here for those who aren't looking at the video feed and wondering what all that crazy crap is behind you right now. Because so Scott runs a studio. And one of the coolest now it's a home, a big home, but he has transitioned it into a world-class recording facility so that he can compete with some of the top symphonic recording studios in all of the LA area. I mean, you've got preamps, you've got every microphone ever invented by anybody ever. You've got all of the things, all the EQs and
enough to get in trouble with. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, enough to do it amazing. So of course, when I met you the first time, I was like, this guy is living a dream of me. I mean, that was the first thing I thought, because he's in his home, but he has pimped out every square inch of his home to live his dream. Like every square inch has cables for microphones. Like he thought of everything, even down to what kind of rug he's going to put in the den to reflect the microphone, right? For his classic organ that he's got in there. I'm like, who is this guy? Like he's got a grand piano over there. He's got drummers, and like the vibe that you have created in this space is nothing short of miraculous, I would say. And when you talk about that energy exchange, I mean, you're sitting in a chair 20 hours a day, and that part sucks. And like stressing and all of that is no fun. But like, the people that are coming through there, I mean, he's got guys from like Earth, Wind, and Fire, some of the best session violinists on planet Earth. He's got like classic jazz vocalist Sergio Mendes. He's got Grammys on the wall, like pictures from ridiculous 80s hairband days all the way up to, modern stuff. But like when you're sitting in that space, with like the candle lit behind you, you're sitting and you guys have thought of every detail. There's food, there's water, there's great coffee. You just feel so at home in a space like that. And, all of the people that come through and record, they're just so well taken care of. And that made a huge impression on me. Like to this day, I mean, now it's COVID, so we don't see anybody anymore. But like, I remember coming home from that and just being like, wow, like what a nice touch it is to have these bottles of, labeled mouthwash in the bathroom. What a nice touch it is to have multiple glass jars of candy and bananas and just things that make you, everywhere you go, feel so at home. And, I was just sitting there on the couch as a fly on the wall in some of these sessions, and the vibe, I mean, it's just the things coming out of that control room, the sound, it's just so imbued with magic. There's just this feeling of, this is good. What is happening here? I don't know what's happening here, but it feels good to me. It feels like this is like a hub that is bringing universal good out into the world. And I mean, I think, kudos to you for building that and for having the vision to do that. Because I can only imagine it must have taken years and years and years to turn this concept into the mothership that is now your work environment, right? I mean, how long did it actually take?
Well, that was a very kind description. I really appreciate it.
I meant every word.
Frankfurt Studio is definitely a product of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of my wife, Sharon, and I. She is a major part of supporting this habit because she understands that hospitality is something that is crucial to kind of the culture that we're creating, and in our little space here. And, that has to do with all the and I love technology. I mean, that's been my industry. Yeah. But Ross, when what you described is exactly what we hope, because at the end of the day, all the end user cares about, when I say the end user, the listener, is what comes out of those speakers or those earbuds. They don't care how it got here. And if I can make you feel something before you perform, like you're cared for, you're in a safe place, you can do what you need to do. Sharon understands that if we can hand you, instead of, a stale coffee from a packet, if we can hand you a cappuccino instead, that you're going to feel cared for because we do care for you, and you're going to enjoy your session more, you're going to get more value for it. You're going to give me something on the microphone that gets through the speakers that's better than what it could possibly have been. Same thing with like, Scott, how'd you get that drum sound? Or how'd you get that kick drum? It's like, I can tell you, I can show you, but it's really like, was there a pencil on the stand so that you didn't have to feel awkward when you were asked to change the and of 4 at bar 62? It's like, it's those little touches. And so she's amazing at bringing that part of the business to its aesthetic level. She's in charge of how things look. As far as how long it took to kind of put everything together, it's one of those things where it's all passion driven. So I moved in here in 1993, and we converted for the first couple of years, I had most of the gear that I had at the time in the living room. So we just had a kind of standalone, kind of like people do now, and that turned into the dream of, hey, because I'm a drummer, right? So I have to have a space that's got good sound transfer quality. It has to keep the outside out and the inside in. So I was, when I was talking about heroes earlier, I couldn't help but think of Dennis Lambert, who's a great songwriter. He wrote things like, ain't no woman like the one I got. That's those hits from those days. Yeah. To this day, sure. But he's a great, great writer and a great man. And he had a studio in Encino. And that studio was full-fledged, and I just felt like I was in a spaceship up there too. And he was looking at me, and he was one of those mentoring types, and would just, Scott, there's nothing like having a pad of paper and a pencil, and just being able to have a coffee and a cigarette, and just just write from your heart. And he would just talk about that like with so much gravitas. I just felt like, yeah, I just wanted to be that guy that he was describing.
Get me a cigarette.
Right? And so he had this whole thing happening there. And so when it came time for us to like start building our conversion, I asked him, if he could give me some pointers, and he turned me on to his builder. And Ross, you have to understand, I'm older than dirt, right? So 93, I mean, but in 93, studios on Magnolia Boulevard, on Sunset, all that stuff, they were already built. They were done. And most of these builders that had specialized skills they had less to do. So it was the people like Michael Boddicker and this one and that one who built these amazing facilities at home using these retired studio builders. That was kind of a new thing at the time. And there was even a lot of controversy. There was a lot of blowback of like, hey, you guys shouldn't have commercial facilities in your homes. What are you doing? And there was a lot of blowback. Anyway, story for another time.
Yeah.
Bottom line is I was able to engage Ron Ballmer, one of the great studio builders of a record plant and all these different rooms. And so he helped with Greg Thompson, the designer of the room, get us to a place where we had like a little mini Schnee studio going on over here, because Greg Thompson designed Schnee Studios and then Ron built for Greg. And so we don't have floated floors, but we have just about everything else. We've got, very heavy construction, very, very thick walls, good trapping, which turned out to be a key reason why there was a symbiotic thing between me and Spectrasonics, because I had a really solid listening environment, which is why I could work a lot from home, because Spectrasonics needed that kind of thing. So there was a real symbiosis going on there. But yeah, 93. And then, again, our passion for making records and for working in the industry just kind of led all those decisions. So it's like, all right, well, I've got this really great ISO, but the piano's in the living room. I also have to rehearse this band next month, and they're 5 pieces. Where am I going to do that? I got to pre-produce those guys. So we decided to gut the living room and just redecorate that so it kind of became a rehearsrsal stage. And then the rehearsal stage sort of turned into you know what? Why don't we just run a snake through here and set up the tie lines and just do the rest? I mean, we came this far. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, right.
And so then that room has a really decent sound, as it turns out. We didn't really have, I had George Augsburger tune the commercial build over here in the 3 rooms that we have over here. But the rest of the house, which amounts to those 2 rooms, we call it the Shire, the den. You can see all the stuff on the website, by the way. There's a map. But and then the living room.
We'll link to it. Don't worry.
Good. And then the living room itself. So we wired those, and then we realized, we need a place to isolate amplifiers. So we built a place in the garage where it's like a partition where the amps little amp room they can live, and they have feeds. And then every little closet, every hallway, anywhere where we thought we could remote something, we put tie lines in while the walls were open. And that made it possible to do all kinds of things, echo chambers and full rhythm section plus horns, or we can do 20 strings live in the room and do a full rhythm section in here without blinking. Pre-COVID, it was no big deal. Now we are doing sessions again, which is great. And one of the interesting things about how we're set up is that every room has an exterior door. So when clients roll up now, we still distance, we still do the PPEs, we do everything we have to do. But the nice thing is that the foot traffic can be optional. Like if people don't want to cross paths with other people, they can literally come into their space from the outside and go out. Yep. And that is allowing us to feel like we're, working with people again instead of screens. That's been really a nice thing. It's not quite back to where it was, but it is coming back online, and very, very happy about that. Yeah, so, and then the gear is one of those things where I've been there and back. I've been to I have to own everything that there is as a younger producer to, get and keep and retain the tools that you actually have a relationship, a technical and a musical relationship with. Keep those, focus on those. So this room that I'm sitting in here was wall-to-wall synthesizers, racks, just insanity. The whole arms race of music, back in the 2000s and all that. And I reduced it down to the pieces that I use every day and love. And so as a result now years going by, the studio has been officially Scott Frankfurt Studio for about 7 years or so, where it's been a full-time, everyday pursuit. That's, the gear has to accommodate 2 things. My personal taste as a producer is one thing, but when you have third-party engineers coming in, when you have artists that have opinions, when you have all those things, there are certain things you just have to have around for their comfort level. So you and I have talked about this, but it's just one of those weird things about mythology.
Yeah.
You can't say this sounds as good as a Neve unless you have the Neve sitting there. Does that make sense? You can't say, you should try this mic because believe me, this sounds as good as the 47 that you remember, which is okay to say if you have a 47. Yes. And then everybody relaxes and they go, all right, I'll listen to your blue microphone or whatever. And it's like, okay, then so you take out the mythology and quite frankly, Ross, you take out the fear.
Yeah.
You take out the fear of the person that's
FOMO.
like, and it's like all of a sudden the people start using their ears again and they start listening to what they're actually hearing coming out of the speakers, and it's like, that sounds great.
Right, like, does that sound like there's a problem here, or does that sound musical as hell?
And you know what? And kudos to Eric Persing too, because I learned this in my palace training, so to speak. Doing that job, because Eric was one of the. I don't know if you ever heard me say this about him, but he's one of the great audio skeptics. He just doesn't believe anything until he hears it with his own ears, and goes to great lengths to prove his theories about that stuff. So it doesn't matter if it's a $40 part or a $40,000 part. If it doesn't sound as good, if the expensive one doesn't sound as good for any reason, all the hype and all the marketing and all that, if the $40 part sounds better, it's like, that's what we use. And it's like, that's a hard thing a lot of us take a lot of creative security in how much they spent on a piece of equipment, when it's like, it takes a little more bravery to say, this one sounds better on that person or on that thing. And so we have a nice mix, I think, of tools that are what are my favorite tools and the tools that people expect. And that's really the why of how it gets collected. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, Sharon will tell you, we pretty much reinvest constantly. We're just constantly trying to keep the dream alive by reinvesting. And so that's largely, and then you turn back, 2 decades later, and it's like, oh yeah, we got a bunch of gear, and now it's vintage.
Got a fair, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that brand new thing that is the old sound that you were fighting so hard to convince people.
My microphone, it was the most expensive
I
thing
remember that blue microphone back in the day.
Right. Or my drums. To me, they're still brand new, right? But it's like, they're these Gretsch drums that are
thousands of sessions later.
Apparently like really coveted. And it's like I had no idea. They're just the drums I bought in high school. How did I know?
The drums, It's so funny. But one other takeaway that I learned, something that really, really impressed, I mean, that will stay with me forever is, obviously you have worked, and I think this is good to know for people who are starting out. Like you command a much higher day rate, hourly rate than, many people. Obviously, tons of gear, tons of experience is a big part of that. But also the experience of, the hospitality side of things that you take so good care of. But another thing that really stuck with me is the preparation and care that you put into sessions before the session. Because I just kind of assumed somebody's going to roll. I don't know what I thought, honestly. I was like, okay, somebody rolls in, Earth, Wind, and Fire, whoever it is, they show up and you figure it out and you go. Well, having helped you set up some of those sessions the day before or a couple days before, I know, I learned, oh, that's not how it works. I mean, you are so meticulous about, okay, we've got so-and-so coming on Friday. It's Tuesday. So that means that I need to get these chairs placed in the den in this order. And I need to have these microphones with these cables next to each chair. And, she's left-handed, so her coffee plate needs to be on the left side. And, he has a cane, so he can't be walking over cables. So he's got to, there's just so much thought and detail that goes into that pre-planning and then testing of all of those things. So it's like, okay, let's check every mic. Let's check there's no feedback. Let's check that there's no hiss or any hum anywhere. And then not really going into a session until all of that is done. And then when they walk in, they just get this almost magical, seamless experience that everything just works. Hopefully the first time everything just works. Knock on wood, right? But I just, that was a real paradigm shift for me watching that. And then you think okay, that is a part of how you justify higher hourly rates, higher day rates, higher job rates, because somebody knows that when they're signing up to work with you, they're getting this whole thing and they can just kind of bank on that. There's not a lot of variables from their perspective. And I think that's really cool and a lot to be learned for younger people who might want to do what you do, I think.
Well, I really appreciate that, Ross. It sounded like a little PTSD there.
Oh yeah, like a little bit. No, but it really it got me thinking. That's for sure.
Well,
Absolutely.
it's a great point, and I think it's worth saying that the whole reason that we do this, when we talk about passion and love, there's got to be some juice for the squeeze. And for me, that juice is, we call it the goosebump around here. How do we get the goosebump? And it doesn't matter if it's a mix. It doesn't matter if it's an arrangement. It doesn't matter if it's a songwriting session. It doesn't matter if it's Sergio. It doesn't matter if it's a newbie with their guitar. It doesn't matter who it is.
Yep.
We're all looking for our expression, if it's a musical song or if it's a score or whatever it is, we're looking for the goosebump of we did that right. That sounds great. I felt something. Because there's something about music that I know all agree is sublime. There's something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. And you know as well as I do, when that mix is finally right, it can bring a tear. I mean, it can be like, oh gosh, this was such a fight. I'm fighting for this, not perfection, but you're fighting for that, that other quality, that otherness of something truly great. It's like watching Kobe dunk in the old days or something. It's just like watching someone who's really got, and that's in a mix or in a session, in an artistic endeavor. Exactly. Hearing Maruja hit a note in a pop song that'll just peel the paint off the walls and make you feel it. You know what I mean? It's like all of those things are they're the stuff of why we do this. And so what's the number one enemy of that? The number one enemy is distraction. Fear. And I tell the pencil story a lot. You've heard it, where if could I have a pencil? Because they need to make a change the producer asked for. And now everyone's moved for 20 minutes and now the session grinds to a halt because there wasn't a pencil on the stand. It's like every little thing that can take away from inspiration is the enemy around here. We are trying, and we fail. We don't get it right every single session, every single day, but we work so hard, as you described, to be ahead of it so that there's room for two things. There's room for you to breathe, and there's room for God, we like to say. How do you know what you're going to play until you play it?
Quincy Jones' famous quote, right?
Exactly. So the truth of that is, the truth of that is that you have to prepare. And, some people might be able to do it faster than we can, but we feel like we have to sit in every chair that everyone's going to sit in and say, hey, does that feel right? Because, Ross, for me, it goes back to those first sessions. My very first recording session was with Vicky Shaw in a big 70s studio, and it was like, I'd never seen anything like it. I was just hooked for life. I mean, just even the light switch, that big potentiometer on the wall to change how,
Well, what was that studio that we went to? Was it the Bridge, the classic?
Yes.
Where we went, it was the Bridge, right?
Yes, in Burbank. Yes.
So that was such a profound experience for me because, I mean, you want to talk about a mind-blowing experience. I think people who haven't lived in LA or haven't experienced what the music industry is at the professional level, if you think you should walk into that environment, I think. Because so I was there with Scott and we're watching, and it was a full symphonic orchestra, and this is a place where, I think they did Simpsons and various other big things in this room. So we're sitting there, and all of these session musicians file in. They're very cordial, very polite. They're shaking hands, hello. Maybe 40, 50 people walk in.
Right.
They all kind of they file into the room, and I'm thinking okay, we're gonna get some coffee, we got a while is what I'm thinking before anything's gonna happen here, because there's just so many people. They all sit down. There's and then somebody walks up to the podium, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. They're just playing this whole thing, and then they're done. And I didn't hear I'm not a genius, but I'd like to think I have a pretty good musical ear in terms of at least hearing stuff. I didn't hear a single mistake from any of them in however long the piece of music was. And then the producers and writers kind of in the control room, they're sort of sitting there and they're like, chatting amongst themselves. They get on the intercom. They're like, yeah, that's G3, the G3 on page 44 for the oboe. Can we make that a G sharp?
Right.
Okay, great. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all again, except apparently with a G sharp this time in one part. And then I asked Scott, I was like, how many times have they practiced this? He's like, oh, they've never seen that music before in their life. They literally just sight read it. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. That's not possible.
It is a thing to behold. Session musicians.
That was when I'm like, okay, I bow down for the level of talent in this town. It's insane.
Oh, LA has one of the best session orchestras, and scene. I wish it was. It's going to come back, but a lot of people are going through it right now. But yes, that is something to behold, to see session musicians read something down, because the nuance level that is coming across to the composer. Now, the composer has spent a lot of time with the music, so they know that, oops, there was a little something copied wrong for the oboe. So they actually played the note on the page, but the person that copied it didn't get the note right. And nobody
made a mistake. Exactly. Yeah, that's the part that you have to take away from this.
But there is something beautiful about the whole. If you zoom back a little bit and you just look at, okay, there's a film that all of these people are so invested in that now has hired a composer who has spent who knows how long making this music right with the directors to make sure that story is being told properly from the point of view of the music. And then all of the people in the composer's world that have to get those musicians in the room, the contractors, the studio booked, all of that stuff at extremely high cost. So there's a lot of trust. The composer is trusting that the musicians are formidable enough to play that stuff down. Musicians are trusting that the music that's on the page is worthy of their time. The people in the studio are concerned that they capture, because it's only going to go down one time, and you've got 40 mics out there, and you've got to get that rough mix perfect. It may be mixed later, but you've got to make sure that there's a rough there that somebody can approve in real time. On and on and on and on it goes, all the way down the chain. There are so many hearts and minds involved in the simple music behind, one scene of one movie, and think about how much media gets cranked out. So, I mean, it's an amazing thing to be a part of that machine. It's very, very exciting. And in my latter part of my career, I really enjoy doing the scoring stuff as much. I still love a good rock record. I really do.
You can do that too.
But I have to say that there is something about, I think we all grow and evolve, and there's something really beautiful about pursuing music, because you can look at any genre at any given day. One day I'm working on beats for my assistant Sierra, which is like these really contemporary modern beats, and then the next day I'm cutting a cello on a quartet, or on a score for Grant Fonda or someone like that, who's writing for a romantic comedy, and it's this like heart-tugging thing. And then over here's this Western thing, or this punk thing, or this crazy jazz thing, and it's like, and I think that's ties back in, just into loving what you do. I love, me personally, I love the surprises. I love not knowing exactly what's coming in. I have a couple of indies coming in this next couple of weeks. I have no idea what they're going to bring me. I'm so excited. I have no idea what we're going to do and what's going to come out, but I know I'm going to be chasing that goosebump.
Sure.
And so it's very much like you say. It's like there's so many aspects to it, and we can all relate to that in different creative fields. But there's something about you have all this preparation, and the studio's ready, and that. So our little part is the studio part. So I care very much about how do people feel when they're here. Is the audio spot on, world class? Because they could be at Capitol right now. They could be at the Village right now. They could have been at the Bridge. The Bridge isn't with us anymore. The Bridge is gone. But they could be in one of these world-class facilities, and yet they chose to be here. And to me, that's a tremendous responsibility. And I want to sit in every single chair in that orchestra, or I want to sit where the bass player is going to sit, or I want to sit where the drummer is going to sit and feel what he's going to feel, right down to where that music stand is. And as far as rates and all of that stuff, rates come, and I always look at it like this. If someone is not happy with what they think they're going to need to pay, then I haven't done my job communicating the value of what they're going to get. Because almost to a client, every time we do a good job explaining what they're going to get, they don't have a problem with the rate, because they realize, especially the ones that have been around a few sessions, they realize that, I can pay half that down the street, but I won't love what I have when I'm done. It happens all the time.
Yep.
All the time. Yep. And I tell people, this is a service business. If you're not happy with what we did, then we're not done, regardless of what the rate or the hourly or the day rate or the week rate or whatever it was. And I also tell people too that it's like, if we're going to talk about doing this, it's going to be two things. It's going to be all of us trying to make your dream happen, and all of you trying to get yourself in the room, and that means you're going to have your homework too, because I'm not going to sit here and soft pedal the fact that you can't sing today. And you thought it was okay to come to the studio. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, you went out and partied last night. I'm sorry. I can't record this. And it's like, if that's my job, that isn't all my job every day. If I'm asked to produce it and care, if it's their party and they're self-producing and they want to do that, then of course, that's not my place to say. I would never say that. But, I work with a lot of people that want me to weigh in on what they're able to do, and so I work with a lot of vocalists and a lot of rhythm sections, because those are kind of not that I'm a singer, but I really care about what comes out of the speakers, and I have the ability to be a fan. And it's like, if it's not moving me and not touching me, then I haven't been able to achieve recording what that person said they wanted. If their stated end goal is to, capture the heart and mind of the listener, then that's my job, is to help them do that, to extract, to pull out everything they can. And I can't just yell at them to do that. We have to be on the same page. We have to be partners, and we have to trust each other, and so I think that it's like, one of the hard things is that, people come out of school, or they jump into this industry, and they kind of want to jump straight to the chair that you or I might be sitting in, where we can talk to someone in a way that has credibility and say, you know what, that was flat. Now, if I've never sung on a record and don't know what it feels like to think you're in tune and be a little under, I'm going to say that wrong. I'm going to say that wrong. And they're going to know it, and they're going to get pissed. They are not going to be happy. Mm-hmm. But when you can talk to a drummer and say, oh man, that was awesome, just lay back that snare a little bit and we got it. Or, hey, the pocket is insane. Can you tune up that D string? You've got to be able to do those things in a way that musicians who have worked their whole life to play their instrument well won't like, who are you to tell me whether this is my sound? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it takes
I got a $150,000 violin here, asshole.
Right, exactly. And it's like, it's hilarious, the stuff that you want to be able to say, but you have to, got to bring your humanity to it. You've got to bring that sensitivity of what they went through to get here, to be able to play that and say it in a way that is believable, purposeful, and not just wanting to hear yourself talk, because that's the number one thing we do wrong. It's just like this. So, yeah.
Speaking of which, Scott, I was going to say, I feel like you've been incredibly generous with your time so far. I'm conscious of how long. I could talk with you all day about this stuff, as you know. And I know we will talk much more after this. But I'm assuming you've got stuff that you got to get to. I know we've been at it for a good bit of time here. So I just want to tell you that I really appreciate you coming on, first of all, and sharing your wisdom. And I was hoping to get maybe a parting blow from you. I want to hear, what is the best career in the creative arts? We know it's tough, a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice that you ever got?
in career in like career advice?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, I would say this is going to sound a little weird, but there is a composer. His name is Jeremy Lubbock. He's in South Africa now, I believe. He was one of the great string arrangers, a modern day Brahms. I mean, I really think he was one of the best of the best. And you know, a lot of what you ever heard that was amazing come out of David Foster's camp and all of that. Barbra Streisand, all those people. They relied on Jeremy heavily, so he was the real deal. And I worked with him a few times on various projects. He brought me. I should say I worked with him. He brought me in on a lot of projects that I'm very proud to have in my history. But Jeremy, an Englishman, you know, very proper, you know, London Symphony Orchestra kind of guy, and Jeremy said a few things to me that I hear ring in my ears every single day. One is, Scotty, there's no substitute for right. And when he said there's no substitute for right, I started realizing that it's like, wow, that is really something, because when you think of it musically, and you're really close to a musical solution or a good mix or a good whatever, it's like there's a fatigue that kicks in, and it's like, it's good enough, or this will work. This will work, I think, is also the enemy of greatness, you know.
Right.
And so when he said there's no substitute for right, it's like it's that thing that every time I'm a little tired or just feel like that'll pass, you know, it's like then I hear that ringing in my head and I go forward and I push a little harder, you know. Or if it's, you know, I got 10,000 samples I got to trim. Now, I can trim those manually and do them right so that they absolutely do not click and never need to be checked again. Or I can use some, you know, software crossfader to blah, 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 you know. So there's no substitute for right is really one of them. And then the other thing he said to me that I think of every single day is, it's not how you play, it's what's in between the notes that you play. Which speaks to phrasing and care and patience and all of the things that have nothing to do with the act of playing the note, but everything that happened around the note, the space around the note. And it's like, those two things are like, you can apply that to life anywhere you want, and those two things will serve you well, you know. So maybe I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great ender. All right, we're going to wrap it. That concludes the official podcast. We did it.